All right, Bara, you made it onto the network. I love the hat, by the way. It says love. Pretty cool.
Thank you. I'm happy to be
Yeah,
here.
and we're here with husky voiced Bara, recovering from some laryngitis. So this isn't her normal voice, everyone. Okay. So how do we get connected? By the way, I know someone connected us, but I always schedule these way in advance, so sometimes I forget.
Yeah, Annie Franceschi connected us.
Yes, Annie. She was on the show a long, long time ago. And I always keep up with everyone that's on the network. So I always send like a follow up, every couple months, like, "Hey, how you doing?" And she was like, "Oh, you got to talk to Bara." I was like, "Okay, sounds good."
That's awesome. Yeah, Annie's great. I'm glad she introduced me to you. I've been loving your show. So,
Nice. That's real. It's always a fun thing to hear, right? Someone likes your show and stuff.
oh, yeah, I can imagine.
So I want to jump into your life. I mean, what you're up to. I know off before we start recording, you're getting out of Southern California here, but tell me a little bit about Bara, like the life story, condensed version. I mean, how do we get to this point?
Ooh, the life story of Bara, trying to condense it really well, was
Yeah.
little kid, got to grow up in Indonesia in a small expat community. Super cool. Really awesome. But there were like 26 kids in my whole school.
Oh,
So it was like really important to, it felt really important to fit in and to belong. Because if one kid didn't like you, that might mean you had no friends, you know?
yeah.
So I think from that point on, I kind of always struggled with this sense of belonging and feeling like I didn't quite fit in. But I still loved life, had a good time. I've always been a pretty positive person, loved having fun. Went to moved to California in seventh grade, went to Colorado for college. Always had a bunch of friends, but just always had the sense that they didn't actually really want to be spending time with me. Like, I just happened to meet all these really
Really?
nice people who were just so nice that they'd hang out with me, even though they didn't like me.
What? What? Hold on. I have to understand this. What does that mean? Like they did.
I think I found out from talking about this that it's actually more common than you'd think. I think it wasn't like that ever present in my life. It wasn't like I thought everyone hated me or anything. But I think most of us don't realize that people like us as much as they do.
Huh. Like, okay, this is a very different. We're gonna go down a different avenue here on this. This is what we do here.
Let's do
So
it.
you believe this is a fairly common incident with people about this? Like,
Yeah. Maybe not to be articulated this extremely, but I think that a lot of people feel like they don't quite belong in the groups that they're in or like they're not fully valued when a lot of times that's not really true.
why do you think people feel that way?
Ooh, I think some of it starts when we're younger and we notice the ways that we're different
Hmm.
because society sometimes it seems like we're supposed to all show up in a very similar way. Even if you think about like the way schools are structured, they're structured for kids who are able to sit there quietly for 8 hours or whatever. I think also, this is changing, which is wonderful. But when I was a kid, boys are supposed to play in a certain way, girls are supposed to play in a certain way. I like to do a lot of the boy things. I didn't like to hang out with a lot of the girls. So all these little things kind of build up, I think, and make us think maybe I don't really quite actually belong and to see ourselves as different instead of special and unique.
Yeah. No, that's very interesting. And then like, okay, so let me break this down. Like the people you're around. I got it. This is very. I love stuff like this. There's a sense of like, okay, we're hanging out, but I'm not sure these people are really as into me as I like the way I think, the way I see myself. Like, is this like doubt about your place in the relationship amongst your friends?
Yeah, totally. Like, okay, they're inviting me to these places, but they all are much closer than I am to them.
Oh,
And that's
okay.
because of their desires, not mine, you know?
Mm,
I think for some cases it was true for me when I got older, but it's because I was pushing people away instead of they were pushing me away. I
Yeah.
wasn't opening up and being fully vulnerable in myself. I certainly wasn't talking about this. So,
Who is?
because right? Yeah. And so because of that, there was this invisible wall between us, but I was the one who'd put it up.
So how would so then okay, this is maybe the past. I'm not sure how you are in the present, but how would you show up then around your friends if they're doing all these things that maybe they're into, maybe that's not you. How do you show up and how do you think they perceived you in that?
Well, I was into a lot of the things that we were doing, and that's
Okay.
why, I'd keep showing up and doing them. But I think for me, it was this sense like, can you actually repeat the question? I kind of,
Yeah, you're like, well, how do you show up then to people? Like if you feel like maybe they're not that into me, is it maybe the projection of how you're showing up to them that you're thinking? Is it like maybe
yes.
they see that in you, like, well, Bara, I mean, she's with us, but like, I'm not sure she's with us. Like, how are you projecting yourself in these environments?
Yeah, I think that it totally is a mirroring situation
Right.
that tends to happen where we're like, "Oh, okay, they don't really want me here, so I don't really wanna do anything to upset them or piss
Mm,
them off, so I'm not gonna be my full authentic self." And then they're like, "Well, you're hiding yourself from us." All this is subconscious, I think, you
yeah.
know? You're not
Right.
being that warm and friendly to us, so it pushes them a little bit away, and it's kinda this, like, 2 magnets,
Yeah.
repelling each other a little bit.
Mm, So this did this continue for you as you in the story of Bara? Is this kind of a continuous thing happening?
Well, it's pretty funny because it's funny that we're having this conversation today because I was convinced this is something I overcame, and in many ways I did. I think, using energy healing, meditation, and a lot of the techniques that I used with folks now, these walls kind of dissolved, and I started to really feel this wonderful sense of belonging. And I still have that because I know that I belong wherever I am, and it's not dependent on the people who are around me.
Hmm.
And I think everyone can get to that place, and it's such a beautiful place to be. I also realized in having a conversation yesterday that I think I had started to do something similar with myself, in certain a certain group of people that I'd spend time with, where I was thinking, okay, well, they don't really want me there, they're just.
Mm.
And it was so funny and insightful to have this conversation because I was like, damn it, I thought I overcame this. And I do believe we can completely overcome stuff. I
Yeah.
know that some healers and teachers say that you'll never completely get rid of it. I don't think it's
Mm.
helpful to believe that. I believe that one day I might be completely through this, but it turns out that it did pop up again a little bit. And I think it may have been inspired by some stress around moving and other things. It's like I got
Yeah.
stressed in one area and I'm carrying that stress into other areas in my life.
Yeah. It's fascinating. I mean, it's actually this is like actually very weird that we're having this conversation because like I just moved here to Colorado and you think like you're moving from one place to the next and you're kind of there's somewhat of a reinvention or reintroduction of yourself to a whole new subset of people. Like these people don't know you. They don't know anything about you. And so the presentation of self is an interesting conversation when you're meeting a lot of new people versus when people know you already. And when you show up in gatherings and people have known you for a long time, there's an expectation of how you present yourself. And when you're in a new place, it's like, oh, I could be different if I want to be, or I could change this. It's a weird thing to play in your mind about that.
Yeah, totally. I think it's actually one of the best times because you do get to totally reinvent yourself without any pressure, you know?
Yes.
If you meet some people and it turns out that it doesn't vibe that well, that's cool. You're still the new person. You can go into another space and be the new person in that space.
I love that. So as we move along in the life story here, how did this start? Where did you move to next? What was the next part of the journey here for you?
So, my journey, I was in college kind of feeling this way, went to work as an engineer in the energy industry, moved around to different places, but I was kind of had this subtle feeling with me through that time. And I would be hanging out with people all over the country. I had friends in so many states. I'd be going to get together with a group where we'd rent out an entire condo building because there were so many of us. And I kept getting the invites, but I still felt this way. And then it was 2019 when I decided to look into energy healing a little bit. And I went on this yoga meditation energy healing retreat. And I was in Costa Rica on this retreat having my first energy healing ever. And the person working on me asked me about this wall that I had up and asked me like about what was up with my masculine energy and why I push people away. And it was so interesting because I'd never thought about this before. I think in that instant, it became clear to me that I'd had this wall up, that I felt that way with all of these people, but it hadn't really been in my conscious awareness until that moment. And I was like, oh my goodness, you're right. I've had this wall up my whole life, as long as I can remember. And that's what's messing with me.
Yeah. It was interesting. I hung on kind of the obviously the whole thing, but masculine energy that you mentioned, like, how do you feel that made you different from other people? Like you saw talking about in relation to like other women having this masculine energy, and that was a different thing to other women when you were around, or explain that.
Well, I think so. I think this healer meant it in terms of like the yin and yang, like this
Okay.
more forward energy. But I'm glad you asked that question because I think almost the inverse of that is what you were talking about is going on. Like I do have a more masculine energy from the traditional sense than a lot of women, you know.
Okay.
More of a I did at that time, especially. Like I was much more of a like doer. And then even playing as a kid, I was like, let's get really dirty. Let's,
Yeah.
play aggressively. I'm not interested in Barbies. Fine. I'll play with Ken dolls or whatever it is. And so I think that I saw myself as different because of that. And so I saw the other women as different from me,
Mm,
probably more so than them seeing me as different than them. But I think I projected that onto them. So I thought they were seeing me as different because that's such a common thing that people do.
yeah. This is fascinating. So, I did not expect this. That's the great thing about not knowing what's gonna happen. I don't script anything, as I'm like, "I'm just gonna let it be what's gonna be," for that. How has this energy affected your personal relationships?
Ooh, well, back then I think it affected my friendships a lot because there was this gap between me and other people. I had a really insightful moment in college. So this continued for a while, but I was talking to a good friend of mine, like one of my best friends, asking if he'd help me with something, maybe take me to the airport or something like that. And I was like, if you do this, I will do this and this and this for you. And he was like, Bara, what are you talking about? You're our friend. I'm going to help
Yeah.
you because you're my friend. You don't need to make it up to me.
Yeah.
And I was like, whoa. It was like this, very surreal moment where I was like, man, what's going on here? And it didn't change my life immediately, but I've come back to it so many times since then to allow people who want to do for me and give to me to do that. I think that was one way that it showed up was like I wasn't accepting other people's gifts or helps or things like that.
Yeah.
And I thought, okay, I'm strong and I don't want to bother Dr. D by, asking him for help. But really, you like giving to people,
Yeah.
obviously. I mean, you made
Yeah.
a
Of
career out of it. And I
course.
think it's so much of what you do with this podcast.
Yeah.
So it's good for you for people to let you give to them, right?
Right.
And it
You just
probably
had a
helps. Go
right, you
ahead.
just had a
Sorry.
struggle with that, like, you feel like you had to do all these tasks to make up for it, sounds like it, you know?
Yeah, and then I think that would feel transactional for you or transactional for whoever's involved too, so it doesn't feel like the same close friendship that you'd like to have.
Mm. This is so interesting. I feel like you're like at the opposite end of okay, I'm gonna say like the opposite end of the friendship I experience. I feel like with people where it's like I was just saying with someone else, like in friendship groups, there's often like everybody plays these different roles in a friendship group, and and often in a friendship group, someone is the glue in the friendship group. Like if this person doesn't suggest things to do or plan things, nothing happens in the group really. They just kind of like zombies around each other, you know. And then there's one person who's like just kind of goes along with everything. And it's like, well, whatever, you know. And there's somebody who's always questioning everything in the group. So it's like all these roles. And I'm curious, like your role seems very interesting to me because, and in some sense, you're considering yourself the outsider in the friendship, but also the person who's like, well, if you do this for me, I'm going to do like 10 things for you to kind of like make it even type of thing.
Yeah, that's very much how it was for me. I think I
Yeah.
was in some ways the glue because I'd be like, "Hey, here's an activity, let's do it." And then that's how it would happen because I like to do
Yeah.
really fun things that most people don't think about doing, in my opinion. Like, I'm gonna be the one who's like, "Let's go to the trampoline park or play laser tag or whatever." Um,
I
and
love
then
that.
it's funny, I think I just had so little self-awareness back then. I remember going on a trip with friends, and I was talking about how easygoing I was, and I was like, "Well, I don't care what we do, so that's why I don't like to plan." And they're like, "That is not true at all. You absolutely care what we do, so can you please contribute to the planning?" Because I was I was that person who would say I didn't care, but then I would
Yeah.
question everything. So it was just this like I didn't know this about myself at all. I kept getting these hints until eventually I like went through this healing process and I was able to kind of separate myself from myself in a way, like
Mm,
separate who I thought I was from how I'm supposed to be, from who I really am, and start seeing these things without at first it was with judgment, so I couldn't see
mm.
that much because you don't wanna see all that stuff if you're gonna judge it. It's like, who wants to know that about themselves? But I got to see more once I learned to, have more self-love and
Yeah. Well, that's, well, one, I have 2 things, but one, what was that like to start diving into that and really be like, "Yeah, no, I have to admit this to myself." Like, what was that emotion like?
oh, it was pretty scary.
Yeah, just like I think a lot of people avoid kind of this existential look inward because it's scary. It's difficult to do the work on yourself. Because what if you do this work and it changes you? Like it fundamentally changes how you see things. I think that's why a lot of people avoid a lot of change because they don't want it to upend their entire existence. It's like, oh, this may be a shitty thing I'm going, but I don't know what it's like to not be shitty. It's like there's a fear of the unknown of being different. Even if it's Chris Voss talks about this a lot, the hostage negotiation. He has a great book, Never Split the Difference. Or maybe a different name, but it's like that. It's basically like people will stay in uncomfortable situations just because it's familiar. And they'll take a loss rather than move in the positive direction just because the loss is familiar for that. It's kind of a weird thing that people do. It's like you can tell yourself, I'm better off going here, but this bad thing is familiar to me. So, I know what the circumstances are here. It's kind of this weird thing we play with ourselves.
Right, you can get really comfortable being uncomfortable.
Right. It's crazy, right? You look at it on the outside, you're like, this is a bad situation. Do something else. And the person could tell you, yes, I want to do something else. But it's like this cost benefit analysis. It's going to be way too hard to do the better thing. So I'll just stay in the worst thing. Like,
Yeah, absolutely.
it's moving is like that. Most people, if you tell them you're moving and you're doing this adventure, yes, it's amazing. But then they go, oh, moving's terrible. Like it's so hard. and the cost of it is too high for a lot of people to do it on a lot of reasons, but on an effort level, it makes people go, I may not like being where I'm at, but I just can't see myself upending everything. Like, even if the other place is better for you. It's just like,
Yeah.
it's a crazy situation to me, I feel like, you know?
Yeah, it's so funny. My sister, one time I was thinking about moving like several years ago before I'd gone through this whole journey. And I was like, oh, it's
Yeah.
just so much work. It's going to take like, you know, a week and I'm going to have to do all this stuff. And she was like, you're talking about spending like a few days so that you can have a better next year. And I was like, "Oh, yeah, good point," and that stuck with me forever. I think that's how it is for all healing and growth too, right? You're
Yeah.
gonna be uncomfortable, and then your whole life will be better.
I love that. I love that. It's gonna be tough for a little bit, but the next year is gonna be better. That's, like, actually really sage wisdom there. Who is this friend? I like this person. Like,
Yeah, I need to, like, call my sister and thank her for that.
I mean, a lot of people don't give you that type of advice. They really don't. They're like, "Oh, yeah, it's gonna be terrible." Like,
Yeah, it's so funny because I keep hearing that from everyone as I'm moving, like, "Oh, moving's the worst," and I'm like,
yeah.
in my head, I was thinking it was the worst at first, but then when I actually thought about what I have to do, it's like, I have to put stuff in boxes. That's not hard.
Why you made that sound very simple. Like,
Right?
it's true though. I mean, I've done some crazy moves where I've had to sell 2 or 3 houses at the same time, buy a house, like, and, I have a family, a daughter, a spouse, and then we're moving all the way across the country sometimes, and then, it's like, but it's like anything, if you do it enough, you know you expect things. You're like, "Okay, I know what this is gonna be like." It's that inertia you're trying to overcome. And I think to kind of your point, like, when you're in these groups with people, there's sometimes this inertia to be a certain type of person in a group and to never change that person of where you're standing in the group. You're just like, well, they expect me to be Bara. I do these type of things. They know I'm going to suggest these type of things, and you become comfortable with that, versus stretching yourself.
Yeah, totally. And it's so funny because the way that we see ourselves and our roles in the group, our friends usually don't see us that way at all. And I found out from having these conversations with people now that I'm not afraid of getting vulnerable and opening up.
Yeah.
And they're like, what are you talking about? Why would you think that? You know?
Mm.
Or maybe they want to change too. And so they'd be thrilled if you suggest a change, but you'll never know if you don't do it.
So when did you really first start having these type of conversations with people in your life, like being really honest and vulnerable?
It may have been when I had a knee surgery in 2020. Um, it might have started before that, but I was still working at my corporate job and I had my meniscus and ACL repaired. And I was working from home and I'd actually only worked in that position from home. Like I moved right as the pandemic was being acknowledged in the US. And my first day in the office, they sent us all to work from home. So
Wow.
my relationships with my coworkers were only through Zoom.
Yeah.
Um, but for the most part, I guess I'd seen a few people in the office. We started going in for certain events. But
Yeah.
so I had this knee surgery and then I felt a lot of anxiety afterwards. And no one ever told me to expect that, you know? And so I reached out to one of the people who I knew sort of from work who had had a knee surgery before me. And I said, "Hey, um, can we talk?" And I didn't think I was going to talk about the anxiety at all. But I was like, "How did you go back to work right away? Like, I can't even bend my knee. I'm supposed to be like sitting at a desk." And she was like, "No, you're probably not expected to be doing that, by the way. You should have asked for more time off and tell your boss, like, you're not gonna be able to work a full 8 hours a day." And, we just got to talking, and I said, I'm also feeling a lot of anxiety." And she said, "Oh my god, thank you for saying that. I felt so much anxiety after my knee surgery." And it helped her to hear me say that and validate it. And then I brought it up in my team meeting when we had our team's Zoom meeting. I said, like, I'm recovering from this and I'm feeling a lot of anxiety right now. And I just wanted to share that. And everyone was like, oh my God, when I had this surgery, I felt anxiety. Or someone told me, I have anxiety right now. And it just
Right.
opened up this new way of connecting. And it felt so good for them. And it felt a lot better for me. And it just proved to me that that was actually a safer way to be, even though it sounded riskier in my head.
Risk, what was the risk you thought?
I think just, admitting weakness was something I used
Mm.
never wanted to do as a kid. I had to be like the toughest kid.
Mm.
And I carried that into college. Like, I didn't care about the relationship if it ended, whatever. I didn't
Yeah.
even want the relationship because it didn't even matter to me.
Oh, yeah.
And I truly believed those things. They were probably somewhat true and somewhat not true. But opening it up and talking about your feelings, I think a lot of people are afraid that they'll be judged
Yeah.
or seen as weak. And it turns out that in many cases, it opens up others to be more comfortable with you because now they see you as a very real person having a human experience that they've probably also had.
I am totally on board with this 1,000%. Like, I think this has like been the process of my podcast over the past 5 years. Is like, I'm just gonna say it. I'm gonna tell people about my life and be honest about the things that I do, and I feel like people see the fakeness in other people, and like they judge that, and they say, "Oh, this doesn't feel authentic to me." But like if it's like, "Listen, I'm struggling," or "Hey, this is how I wind down certain days." I always get people going, "Oh, I'd like to learn more about that." Oh, that I do that too, but there's always this, people are scared to be like themselves because they think, "Oh, if what if you're into this? What if I'm into this thing?" And people like start going, "How could you be like that?" and stuff. I'm just like, as a 45-year-old person, I'm just like, I'm done with that. Like, I am who I am at this current stage. If you're not into it, that's okay. It's like, but this is what I'm into right now. But know that I'm going to keep evolving though. And because I always look at things as like you're living all these lives within one lifetime. It's like lifetimes within lifetimes. And and experiences in life, they grow you and change you. Like what you were just saying, the toughness. And that seems to not be a thing for you at this point. But if somebody met you now, or somebody that knew you then, like way back then, and sees you now, they'd be like, this is a different person. Like a kind of different mentality. That's the kind of the great thing about life, is you can transform over time.
Yeah, it's beautiful. We're not stuck. And so
Oh,
many people feel stuck where they are.
yes.
I've changed so much. You've changed so much. So many
Yes.
of your guests have. Like, we are, yes, we're special and that we're all unique individuals, but we're not any more special than anyone listening to this show.
Yeah.
We can
No.
change. So can you, whoever's listening to this.
Yeah. Yeah. You could definitely be, there's parts of yourself that are just like, I just want to improve on this. Like, you have permission to improve yourself. You do not have to be this type of friend to someone all the time, or this type of partner. Like, you can move forward and continue to grow. That's what it feels like. A lot of your story is like the permission to continue to transform and evolve and to know yourself better.
Right. Yeah. Because for me, I mean, I don't want to say never, but I have a feeling that this journey won't end. Like, growth
Yeah.
is one of my top values. I always want to be expanding and growing. And I need to remind myself sometimes that it's important to rest as well. We don't need
Yes.
to be growing in every moment, but now it's like the world is my playground. It's like someone's like, "Hey, I'm, thinking about developing this course." I'm like, "Cool, I'll try it. I'll experiment with it and see how it goes." Or now I live in an incredible place. I love where I live. I live right on the beach in
Yeah.
Hermosa Beach. It's a beautiful place. The community's incredible. But I got this sense that maybe there's something else out there that I'll like even more. So not holding on to this just because it's more than comfortable, it's
Yes.
very cozy and nice, but let's go see what else is out there. And if it's not better, or if it's not also wonderful, I can always come back.
Yeah.
We're choices. I mean, life's not linear, we don't have to only move in one direction either.
I feel like we're very similar people. I mean, we have a very similar adventure spirit going on. Like, I have left a lot of things in my life that were too comfortable for me. And I just like would get to a point and I'm like, this sounds really I don't know. I know how people are gonna take this. Maybe I don't know, but I'm just gonna say it because I'm just gonna be myself. But like sometimes like things going too well, like I get nervous with that. And I'm like, okay, I want to push myself. I need to be a little uncomfortable here. It's like, I mean, the one of the best jobs I ever had in my life was running this big club. It was a national director of fitness, and I left it because I felt like it was too cushy for me. Like a lot of people would see that as like, what are you doing? And then I moved to Washington State to start up something different. I said, I don't know, I just it's better to kind of like go out on top than to like be flailing. And then someone else controls the narrative of when you stop doing something. I don't
Yeah.
like that. I really don't like that. Like I'm like, so I want to be like one thing I love about my marriage is my wife is like we're always pushing each other. We're always growing and evolving. And I enjoy this long-term relationship because it feels like we're always evolving. We're never settling into the marriage where it's like, all right, we're gonna watch this tonight. This is what we always do. It's like it's changing. And I feel like that I need that in my life to keep moving forward and that I've never arrived. I'm not an arrival person. Some people are like, I did it, I made it. That's not me. That's not me.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm with you on that. It's like I wanna celebrate that I got there, but then
Yes.
maybe hang out there for a little bit, and then, "Okay, where else can I go?" You know?
Yeah. Like I'm definitely the person I will celebrate hard. I'll show up to a brewery with you. We'll have a great time, and then I'll be like, okay, there's more that I can like move towards to improve, like I'm not going to be like, well, mission accomplished, like
Yeah, and I think I have a sense it's the same for you. It's not a mission to improve because, like, something's wrong. It's
no.
just, like, improve because why not, you know?
I think it's the same thing. I don't sense like this big gap or deficiency. It's just like it feels like kind of the point of life is to grow and learn and continuously do that until the end. I
Yeah.
mean, I don't know, why wouldn't you? I'm like,
Yeah, it's so fun to explore new things,
yeah, yeah,
And
but this is
I
uncommon. This is very uncommon though,
Yeah,
because it's a lot of settling in, and that cement is very dangerous because then it keeps you in this. I also think it's. I had this in a different podcast. I was saying I think it also contributes to extremism a little bit when you start cementing your ideology completely, and you start limiting your options. It's very easy to get put into a very extremist ideas because you don't see the spectrum of possibilities beyond the cement that you've created in your life. So I think it's always good to have like options and see, things are on a spectrum. It's like, okay, well, yes, this could be true here. This could be true here. I want to be level headed about it. This opportunity has risk, but this is safe too. Like just to see all different sides of it.
yeah. I think that's really important, and I think it's important to get to a place where that growth isn't driven by, like, a sense of lack or deficiency, because
Yeah.
that's a mistake that other people make sometimes, and I think it's why a lot of people don't try and they stay
Mm.
comfortable. If you're trying to change because something is wrong, you're, like, taking that "this is wrong" and "I'm wrong" energy into whatever you're doing. So you're not going to you probably won't do well at it, and if you do,
Mm.
it won't feel that good. So it's like getting to this place first where you're like feeling good with yourself, embracing who you are and where you are in a way, and then growing out of this desire to grow versus this desire to fix.
Oh man, that's wisdom. That's big wisdom right there. I mean, people. huge wisdom, right? This whole I actually never thought about it on that large of a scale to kind of some like don't change to fix yourself, change to just grow and learn and the process of just exploration. Because I do think a lot of people do what you said, which is I'm going to change because there's just a lot wrong with me. I am broken. I have all these things, so I need to change, you know.
Yeah. And sometimes I'll have those moments, like, when I'm under a lot of stress or whatever. Like, even today, I was like, "I'm ungrounded, like, this is how it's gonna be until I move." And then I was like, "Wait a second." Like, I was like, who do I have to work with to fix this? Or do I need to get a massage? Do I need to go on the beach?" It's like, "Hold on, like, you're good. You're right here. Take some
Yeah,
breaths. You can fix this." And then if you want a massage, that sounds nice. That would feel really
it does
good.
sound nice. Yeah.
But if you're in the massage the whole time, like, "This better fix me," then it's not gonna be a very great massage. That's also a lot of pressure to put on your massage therapist.
That's true. That's very true. I think you're also talking about something like I was just having a conversation with my wife Michelle about this. Is like it's one thing, like you know, if you're in a situation and you're feeling untethered, ungrounded, it's one thing to just like be in it and kind of not know you're in it and just kind of be flailing. And there's another thing to like actually being in the moment and recognizing you're in that moment and go, okay, this is where we're at. I feel like saying it out loud. I feel ungrounded right now. I feel untethered from something and then doing something to course correct it or shifting. Because what happens, I think, is a lot of people is that un, untethered feeling happens and then you're not aware and then you just start going down a weird pathway. It's like you don't stop and go, where am I currently at in this? And then you start making weird decisions at that point.
Right. No one wants that.
No one wants that. And I think it's just and there's the other weird thing is like when you're aware, this is the weird stuff. When you're aware you're in this state and you still make weird decisions. like like what's
Yeah.
that?
Yep. I could ask my past self that on many
you
occasions.
know, like, yeah, I've done this. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's an interesting one. It's kind of like you know it's not going well, and then you continue to make the decision to it not to go well.
Right.
That's interesting to me.
Yeah, that is really interesting, and it's funny because I think in those moments, sometimes it still feels safer because 'cause you're like, "Okay, it's not going well, but it's, like, only this bad," subconsciously. But if I try to fix it, maybe it'll be even worse, or maybe it'll be even scarier. So let's just stay in this place that just kind of sucks.
Okay, this sounds like you've had this conversation before. Like, it kind of sucks. I mean, it's not too bad. Like,
Yeah, I think that's how so many people are living,
mm,
and but not even necessarily acknowledging that it sucks,
mm,
like, "Oh, it's fine," or so many people who I'm talking to now, um, who I'm meeting, or they're hearing about my decision to I'm gonna put my stuff in storage, and I've got a plan for a month, but I'm not sure really where I'm going. They're like, "Oh, that's so amazing. I'd love to do that. I wanna do that so bad." And I'm like, "Okay, well, why aren't you doing it?" Sometimes there's good reasons, like there's a
yeah,
job
of
here, or a
course.
kid in school, but sometimes there's not a good reason. And it's like,
Yeah,
okay, or they say, "In 5 years, I'll be able to do this when this happens with my business." And it's like, "Okay, remember that. Remember that you said that you could make this change when your business gets to this certain point." Because this other thing we do is we're like, "Okay, once I get to this next level, then I'll do these things." But then that next level comes and we're like, "Okay, well, I need to get actually to that next level." And we keep losing sight of the fact that we're already in this place where we can make those
yeah,
changes. And that's a little bit different, I think, than what the energy behind what you and I are talking about, where we're always leveling up in some sort of ways, but it's not like we need to do that to get to the next place. It's not like we're holding ourselves back in some areas until that level
oh,
happens. It's like we're going to do what's aligned for us,
yeah,
and when it's aligned for us, and we're going to trust that
right.
we'll know.
I have a very like we're very aligned on this. And I feel like this is where we're about to have the fork in the road here on this. Like, I have another perspective that I think, I don't know. I don't know if it's different. Maybe it is different. How do you know until you put it out there, right? For me, my other perspective on that is that I just say something in 5 years. I always say to myself, I could be dead in 5 years. I don't know, man. Like, I am, and I had this through talking on my podcast with different people and death doulas and all this stuff. It's like, I don't know, just nothing's promised. You could be dead. And I always remember I'm going to die. I always remember that. And I think that's something we shut out as humans. We don't want to think, especially when you're really young, you don't want to believe that this is your existence in the future. It's kind of like research into retirement. People don't save for retirement because they don't know who that person is in the future. They have zero, like, they can't even imagine that one day they will look different. They will be a different person. So why would I save for this foreign person that is supposed to be me? But I don't know. I don't know who that person is. I try to maintain a perspective like, one day it's going to be over. I mean, like, I'm definitely going to be dead. It's 100% true. Like, and I've talked to people who actually don't believe that. I don't know what they're drinking, but I'm like, it's going to happen for sure. And I think that pushes me to make decisions, because if I keep putting it off, there's a percentage likelihood as I get older and older that this is getting closer. Like,
Yeah,
and honestly, I actually have no clue when it's going to happen. But the older I get, the odds are higher it's going to happen. And then it's going to be 100% true at some point. So this kind of, it sounds grim, I know, everyone. But for me personally, it pushes me to do things. And it also has given me a lot of gratification, because at this age, at 45, I've done pretty much everything I've wanted to do in my life at this point. I'm living on bonus time. For me, it's literally a bonus the rest of the way. And I feel that way because I always took chances. I always moved and did things and tried things, because I always thought to myself, this will be over. There is a finite physicality to this existence, and I'm not going to put it off thinking I have so much time, because I don't have a lot of time.
right. Yeah, I totally agree with that. And actually, for decades, I think I've said, if people ask me, like, what's your life goal? My life goal is to die happy. So, to prepare myself
Yeah.
for that, I live a wonderful, fun existence right now, while also setting myself up so that if I do live to be really old, I'll also
Yeah.
be able to support myself and have a good
That's
time
right.
then. Take care of my body now. So,
Yes.
it's functional when I'm 80, hopefully.
Most definitely, and that is a difficult thing, because in being in the fitness field, it's a very difficult concept with clients and stuff, because again, it's this projection of self to the future, and a lot of people don't recognize that the majority of people only have 51 years of healthful living, functional living. It's a very short amount of time. You don't see yourself as this chronic condition person in the future, or that you may have some issues that will keep you from living the current physical nature that you have now. You just can't fathom that. But the data tells us this all the time, that that's majority of what's going to happen, certainly if you don't take care of yourself. And but somehow we still make this projection that I just can't see this is going to be me. And I'm just like, get with the times. You're going to die. It's every person, every human before you has died. This is not like, oh, maybe I got like a 3% chance. It's a 0% chance. You're gonna be the one to break the mold. Like, enjoy your life. Don't overly be restrictive on things. Take care of yourself and keep growing, because you are literally a fart in the universe. You just really
Yeah.
are. You're no, most people will never remember you. This sounds really bad what I'm saying, but I'm just telling you, will most the humanity will never remember you, more than likely. I mean, you just, unless you're someone who created some masterpiece or music that stood the test of time, you will not be remembered in 1,000 years from now. Enjoy what you're doing now. Like,
Yeah. Yeah, and I really wanna come back to, like, when I was saying earlier about, and kind of see it from a different perspective now that you've shared what you've shared.
Yeah.
When people say, "Okay, in 5 years, my business will be in this place, I can do that." Well, if I'm not, like, coaching them, then, like, that might be the comment of like, okay, cool. Well, like, hey, try to remember that in 5 years, you know?
Yeah.
But really, I think for most people, it's like that could be a very binary way of thinking that they're stuck in, where they're like,
Mm.
oh, I need all this stuff to happen. And that can happen in 5 years. Another cool question to ask yourself, if you're telling yourself that you need these certain life events to happen before you can do what you really want to do, is, well, how can I actually make these things happen now? Or does how can I make what I want happen now without these other things needing to take place first? Sometimes just because that's how you pictured it in your mind doesn't mean that's how it has to be.
Have you know what's interesting? Have you let me ask this question, and I asked it to the audience too. I really think about it, but I'm asking you, Bara, like, has your life turned out the way you thought it was gonna be?
Not at all.
That's probably the answer for everyone listening and for anybody you've ever asked this question.
Yeah. Honestly, there's no way I could have imagined my life being this cool, you know?
That's awesome. That's so awesome.
Yeah, but I think for it to get this cool, I had to step away from the unknown. I left my cushy corporate job. I left the things that I knew. I stopped putting myself in that box and worrying if my friends liked me the same way I liked them, you know?
That's unbelievable. I love that. There's a lot of similarities here, for that, but it sounds like you pushed yourself, and because of that push that you did, it made a more rewarding existence for yourself.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
So tell me about your work now, as we've gone through a lot of this. This has been a very big existential conversation. These are my favorite, by the way. But tell me about your work with people, so we get a really good idea about this and how this links to what we've been talking about.
Yeah, sure. So now I'm a transformational life coach and speaker. I use energy healing in my work. So I work with a lot of people who like they've been reading the self-help books, they've been doing the work in their minds, but they still don't have the lives that they want. They still don't feel the way that they want. So kind of in a way where I was at the start of my journey. Um, and I work with them and help guide them so they don't have to go through that lonely, scary process alone. Like we were talking about earlier, it can be pretty scary to say, like, who am I? You know, or to consider changing your whole life. That's really scary when it's all stuck inside your own head. But by working with someone else who has been through it, who is an intuitive and can understand you, it becomes much safer. And that's one of the things that helped me on my journey as well. But I work with people, I guide them, I help them to cultivate lives filled with joy and inner peace and make happiness a habit for them. So it's their norm and it feels safe and comfortable.
Sounds like very rewarding work to me.
It is very rewarding work.
Man, that's awesome. So I feel like you're ready to like jump off a mountain or something. Like I don't know, I just get this vibe that you're like skiing, surfing, you're hella skiing or something. It's just like you're just going out there, you're grabbing life or something.
I'm grabbing life, but I like to grab life in a safe and supported way.
Okay, that's not
So
what I thought.
like
All right.
like last week I wanted that thrill and that excitement, so I went to Six Flags Magic Mountain, like one of the best amusement parks with the craziest roller coasters. I like crazy roller coasters cuz they're really fun, but you're like supported.
Yeah,
Um that to me is a lot more fun than the idea of going bungee jumping. Like that sounds
yeah.
terrifying, you know?
All of that sounds terrifying. I'm not getting on any roller coasters. None of that stuff. I'm willing to be adventurous and like move places and try some different. I don't want to be like death defying, like
Yeah.
and stuff. So I'm like, no thanks.
Yeah, I'll snowboard, but I'm gonna wear my helmet and I'm
Yeah,
not gonna go
yeah.
into avalanche country.
Okay. It's fantastic. Oh man, that's amazing work. So in your work, I want to dive just a little bit deeper into your work. What are some of the biggest what surprises you when you work with people about in this work? Like when people come to you, what is it you're like, oh, this surprised me about this work that I'm doing?
What surprises me almost every time is when I do energy healing work, like what comes through and how quickly it comes through. It still blows my mind how this stuff even works, but sometimes I will, get some insights that come through to share with someone, and it'll feel really uncomfortable for me to say because I'm like, intellectually, I know that this person doesn't think these things, This
Mhm.
person's so secure. Why should I be telling them that like they're safe and it's okay and they're loved? They're going to think I'm just like some weirdo. Um, but when those words come through, so I'll hear, oh my God, that's exactly what I needed to hear in this moment. Or sometimes intellectually, it doesn't make that much sense because I'll be working on someone's chakras and I like to do them in order, is kind of how I intend to go in. But then I'm somehow connecting like their throat to their sacral. And now we're up here and now we're doing some completely other kind of work. And then we'll be communicating afterwards to hear like, oh yeah, right before you moved to my sacral, I felt something in my gut and this happened and that happened. And then to hear from them the next week or day on what shifted, it just
Yeah.
blows my mind. It's just so cool how quickly we can move stuff with energy healing.
And what's the most common maybe issue people come to you with?
A lot of times it's this feeling of stuckness. Like
Mm,
I've tried everything, I'm working with my therapist and sometimes and this other type of therapist and this other type of person, and it's just not coming together. And so helping them to bring that stuff together and also to see what else they need, because that's something that we'll go through on our journeys is we can get very into seeking and wanting to try all these different things. And some of those things serve us and some of them don't. So to help guide and intuitively, a lot of this comes through with like the energy healing kind of work where we're able to see like, okay, what is serving you? What's not? What can you let go of? What do you need to keep doing?
yeah. You seem like the right person to be doing this type of work. I mean, just the way you push yourself and your adventurous spirit and the way you stretch yourself. I mean, you seem like the right person for this, honestly. Not everybody, you know, different people doing this work, they have different motivations and stuff, but I could say just chatting with you, I mean, you seem like a very grounded, self-aware person to me.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And one of the things that I do think is important, like with clients, is not just pushing them too far. I
Yeah.
think it's important that we're taking like baby steps kind of and just towing into the edge of our comfort zone. Or recently, I renamed that area outside of my comfort zone as the adventure zone to make it feel a little more comfortable, but towing into that area, so
Yeah.
it feels safe, it feels supported instead of just launching ourselves off a mountain like you mentioned and getting too
Yeah.
freaked out and then going back into our cave and staying there forever.
Yeah. It's like going cold turkey into something, right? It's like, well, I just been working in office. Tomorrow I'll be traveling to Iran to go do it. So it's like, whoa, take it easy. It's like,
Yeah.
like it's just, we're in, behavior analysis, just shaping and chaining based exercises. So it's little steps to lead to larger things type of thing. Well, this has been a pretty amazing conversation. I really enjoyed speaking with you, Bara. Seriously, it's been a real pleasure.
Thank you so much, Dr. D. It's been a lot of fun. Like you, I never would have guessed it would take these turns, but I had a blast.
Yeah, please tell everyone how they could connect with your awesome services and just find out more about you.
You can find more about me on my website, baraco.org. I share a lot of blogs on my personal experiences and try to share my lessons so that you don't have to go through the hard times yourself. And on Instagram, I love just sharing what comes up in life. I share a daily moment of joy and all sorts of tips and tricks. You can follow me at Baraco Bara, BARACOBARA.
There it is. Bara, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.